Before we get started, I would like to make a quick update. I lost Bruno's original brake wheel from his original showcase video, and so I fitted him with my original concept brake wheel. He will sport this, barring a few shots in this very video, for his next few appearances. Thank you for listening, and let's get on with it. Well, the internet might not be happy about it, but we talked about Bruno. Still, he's not the focus, so let's get him out of here. There we go, now we got some room. And in case you haven't seen the thumbnail yet, let me show you something that's gonna be relevant really soon. In fact, here's the prototype right now. This is All Engines Go Carly. For those of you who don't know, I actually made this thing during the first half of 2021. Yes, it's that old. Still, for my very first bogie vehicle, I'd say I did a pretty good job. Unlike Bruno, this prototype has the wheels glued directly to the axles. And, unless you can't see it, I'll let you know. There's a Lego plate from a failed stabilizer system that I developed for this model. Aside from permanent markers on the front buffers, there's really not much to detail. Still, if you can tell from the scratch marks, this model did have a face on it. And it's a face that I'm using for my next custom. The one that's supposed to go with this version's final model. The buffer beams are also a part of the chassis design on this version, and as such, the buffer shape isn't perfect. Still, I designed it to be compatible with my coupling system as well as the more typical Trackmaster one. And for what it's worth, I think we have a winning design. If you happen to see any of the other customs in this video, they all use the same bogie system I developed while working on this prototype. So, you can thank this for them. Now then, this side of the prototype is pretty much identical to the other one, except the crank is not present here. Yes. In case you didn't already tell, I did the cab roof and windows with permanent marker. Not the best job, but it works in a pinch. The back is where we see the most differences compared to the final model, as on the actual chassis itself, there's a small ladder on the back of the frame and there's a different hook design for the crane. Now then, let's get this out of the way. Thanks to some footage I filmed a long time ago, we get to the final model, which you'll see right about now. And here we have the final model, which it's a vast improvement over the prototype despite some imperfections. Why did I make this thing again? The purpose of remakes. Yes, you heard that right. I plan on remaking episodes of All Engines Go. Shoot me if you want to, but keep it civil. In universe of my canon, this is an original character named Ramirez. I plan on getting a classic series style version of Carly from the motorized range. Still, not much to talk about on this side, so we'll move on. Unlike the prototype, the final model has a separately printed buffer beam on both bogies. They are glued in place and given silver buffers. Carly in All Engines Go had black buffers in the back, but her front buffers doubled as her headlights, and as such were a golden shade of yellow. I found them kinda weird, so I just went for uniform silver on all four buffers. I also got the face from a Trackmaster push-along Noor Jahan, and honestly this was out of desperation. But it ended up working a lot better than my original plan, a wooden railway Marion face. Now let's move on to the other side. Or her left. For Ramirez, I opted for painted windows this time, and the same goes for the roof. As you can see, I painted the roof on the secondary cab as well. It really does look a lot more like Carly this way. Still, you want to tell which side is where? Look for the crank on the crane. And speaking of the crane, the hook's a different design, not to mention there's a metal ring. I added metal washers and nuts to the edge of the jib for a little more pizzazz, and the ladder's gone completely, not to mention the fact that I painted the ends of the extensions. Now, I will admit, this is not the best version of Carly that's out there. Still, considering how much a lot of fans vocally disapprove of the reboot, I think this is a pretty nice interpretation that should fit into the classic series. And with all the drama that the reboot has received and the franchise as a whole, I think it's in our best interest to work for the best of all worlds. The best of the classic series, the best of CGI series, the best of all engines go. It's crane time. Now the crane's design may seem very familiar to those of you who have seen more than just Thomas, but I will tell you, it can rotate at least 360 degrees if angled right, and extends up to around 7 to 6 inches from a length of 2 to 3 inches. And as you can see in this footage I filmed a while beforehand, balancing this thing while it's hauling or lifting a load, or when the crane's out all the way, is a bit of a challenge. And that wraps up Ramirez. Now, let's get on to something that isn't attached to her body, at least permanently. And here we are with her flatbed. I made this after I made her prototype. If you watched All Engines Go well into the first season, you'll know that Carly has a flatbed that shares her wheel arrangement. And as far as I can tell, there are no flatbeds in real life with 6-wheeled bogies. So far, it's the longest flatbed I have in my collection. And if you're wondering, this flatbed really hauls. I mean, here's a Trackmaster 2 Thomas on top. Since everyone has at least one of these Trackmaster 2 engines, that should give them a good sense of scale on this thing. It's pretty big. Unfortunately, this flatbed can't carry a full straight track, play rail, or Trackmaster. At most, it can carry a half and quarter piece connected. Still, it's not too bad for what it is. And now let's get this thing out of the way so we can get onto so that we can actually compare Ramirez's size with stuff other people might have in their collection. As you can see, she is much bigger than the Trackmaster 2 engines, at least without a tender. And speaking of tenders and rolling stock, here we have her right next to a blue truck from the Trackmaster 2 range. She's easily twice as long as this truck. See? Twice as long. She's the biggest engine I have so far. A single unit one at least. And now, it's on to the next showcase, courtesy of the Ramirez prototype. Coming in on the turntable right now, we have Boxy, the boxcar. Yes, I know, I would have been the first one to showcase the Boxy Custom, but I was beaten to the punch again. Once more by Diecast Engines. Now then, let's get this Ramirez prototype out of the way and talk about Boxy proper. Well, there we are. Now then, let's get on to the details. Boxy is a very old and worn out pink boxcar. And in case you haven't been able to tell, that's what I tried to go for here. In fact, he was the first boxcar I ever made. I made no attempt to make Boxy show accurate aside from his pink coloring. All I wanted to make him was a raggedy old boxcar who was pink with some hints of yellow. This goes on the backside too, and as you can tell, every inch of him is covered in paint. I used both airbrush paints and brush paints to weather him. And due to the fact that he's supposed to be old, I didn't bother with trying to make him symmetrical. He's just grungy by nature. And unlike my other customs, so far, his wheels, entire buffer beams, and couplings are painted. I actually glued a face onto him right before I filmed this review, and it came from an old Trackmaster Colin, which I plan on replacing with a wooden railway version. Boxy wasn't exactly a character on the show, he was just an inanimate boxcar, but I decided a face would be a fun addition. Diecast Engines did so with his custom too. If you haven't heard of Boxy before, I wouldn't be surprised. This guy only showed up pretty late into the first season, and he only has 2 appearances in the entire first season. So he is very much a niche element in the show. That said, like the show, both doors do open. And as you can see, aside from the buffer beams, couplings, and wheels, he is made entirely out of blue plastic, and is hollow all the way through, if you open both sets of doors. He has enough cargo space for at least 2 minis if you fiddle around with them. It's a limited amount of space inside, but you can carry stuff in there, if you know how to make things fit. And yes, before you ask, you can close the doors with a load inside, provided it's skinny enough. Boxy's shorter wheelbase means that while he's not as long as Ramirez, he's definitely a lot taller than Thomas, as you can see by the shot of them right now. If you want more size comparisons, or a more direct evaluation of the scale, here's another boxcar the same size as Boxy next to the Trackmaster 2 Thomas. They big. And yes, I made another boxcar. And another one. You'll see how much at the end. But you will see that they're much nicer looking than Boxy, who is pretty much a dirty mess. There is also another key difference. And that's not just color. The yellow boxcars have latches. Boxy doesn't. His hinges are strong enough to keep the doors in place. But on the yellow boxcars, they're so loose that they're like noodles, and the moment you pop the latch, they just flop open. Still, they have all the same functionality as Boxy. And there's more than one. How many, you ask? 4. Exactly 4. If you don't know why, watch the reboot, at least a quarter of the way into the first season. That should give you some answers. And that wraps up the All Engines Go Mega Custom Showcase. Aside from the obvious, the purpose of these videos is also to showcase some aspects of the All Engines Go reboot under a more positive light. We all know too well how much certain fans will vocally eviscerate people for actually enjoying the show, even little kids. So let's try to act responsibly, and I'll see you next time. Other custom links in the description.